Welcome to Calm Amidst the Chaos. I am Whitney Johnson, the CEO of Disruption Advisors, where we help you grow your people to grow your company. We talk every Thursday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern here in the United States about tools and tips and tricks for how to climb the S curve of learning in your professional and your personal life, because everyone is on an S curve, including you. And I am so delighted because this morning we have a very special guest. His name is Ron Lovett. And he is, let me introduce you. As I introduce you to him, I hope that many of you will say hello and give him a warm and hearty welcome. Here's what you need to know about Ron. First of all, Ron, say hello. As you
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks, Whitney. It's lovely to see you again.
Okay, so here's what you need to know about Ron. Ron, well, he's going to tell you his origin story because it's very fascinating, very colorful. But he formerly was the CEO and founder of Source Security. I'm going to get this totally wrong, but basically a security company in Canada. He sold it. He is now the CEO and founder of a company called Connolly Owens, where he talks about scaling culture. And he is the founder of a company called Vida Living, which is a community-based workforce housing. And we'll tell you a little bit about that toward the end. But Ron, welcome.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I was a little foggy this morning because my 5-year-old woke me up at 3 a.m. and said, "Dad, I have a headache." And I said, "Well, okay, well, like get in bed with me or go back to bed." So I thought she went back to bed, and then I heard the TV go on 20 minutes later. So she was downstairs watching TV, and I had to deal with that. But I'm good. I'm feeling great.
I love it. And I love right behind your head, there's a word that's very important. Outrageous. Okay. Love
Outrageous.
it.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to say hello to a few people, and then we would love to hear your story of how you ended up building a company that was, what's the number? I've got 150. What's the 150 number? Is it 150 security professionals or 150 something else?
Well, that's a good question. I'm probably going to get this wrong. The two numbers that come to mind are
Yeah.
we had with full and part-time about 3,500
Yeah.
staff.
Okay.
I wish we were on 150 countries, but that's not true.
Yeah.
And then we the exit was a 24 times multiple, which was a great exit based on really our strategies of what we had done, the model we had created.
24 times revenue or earnings?
EBITDA, profit,
EBITDA.
which
Okay.
is still great.
That is an impressive multiple. So we're going to talk more about that. Okay. So let's say hello to a few people and then we'll go into story time.
Great.
So Gaba, hello to you from Ghana. Welcome, Tom. We are so happy to have you this morning from Northwestern Kellogg. Yes. Say hello
Hey, Tom.
to Ron. Let's see. Nate, good morning to you. It's nice to see you. It's been a while from the Gulf Coast of the United States.
Welcome.
Saeed, tell us where you're from. Zafarullah, greetings from the Maldives.
Wow. I need to get there.
Yeah. In fact, I have a professional colleague who just went on vacation there. So
Jealous.
top place to be. Okay. Someone, Sushma from India. Jorge, buenos dias. ¿Cómo estás?
Hola.
Carl, there you go. See, Ron knows Spanish as well.
Hello today.
¿Cómo? ¿Realmente sabes español?
Hablé poquito español, sí.
¡Ay, qué impresionante! Jorge, vamos a hablar todo en español.
No, por favor, no.
We're not really. We couldn't pull it off, but we'd like to think that we could. Anu, hello to you. Gava, you said, okay, looking for work. All right, let's see a few more people. Gerald saying, nice to see you, Ron. Tom, yes, 24 times exclamation point. We are talking more about that later. Katja, good morning to you. You've got a fellow countrywoman, Lori from Oakville, Ontario, Canada.
A Canadian.
Yes, that's right.
Welcome, Lori.
Anoop and Saeed. Okay, so let's have you tell us your origin story,
Sure.
Ron, how you ended up here where you are today.
Yeah, so I have a different story. I guess my origin, we're Irish. So I come from the Connolly family. That hails from Ireland. My great-great-grandfather, I believe, was kicked out of Killarney. I think he was a bad boy, and he was asked politely to leave, is what was my understanding. And so my roots in that, I was born in Halifax, Nova Scotia, where I am today, east coast of Canada. And my my father is from the U.S. He's passed now, but he's from Florida. And when I was born, I was not Ron Lovett. I was Ronald Francis Poe III. So my father was Ron Poe, and my grandfather was Ron Poe. Now, I grew up in a with a single mother. living at my grandmother's house. And during that time, you don't know what you don't know. I didn't have a father. Me
Mhm.
and my sister, who was 2 years older than I, were growing up there. And we didn't grow up poor. My mom did a fabulous job of ensuring that we had a great lifestyle, and we felt safe. But I certainly, was going through old picture albums, and I would see, airplanes and boats and yachts and houses in the Bahamas. And I would always say to mom, like, the Grammy's house is great, but where's all this stuff? And she said, your dad used to fix up these boats and sell them. And and so I my childhood was different. I would say, because my mom also traveled so much. So we lived with my grandmother until I believe I was about 8 years old. And then my mom was dating a gentleman by the name of Barry Lovett.
Mm.
And they they were married maybe 4 or 5 years later. Um, and I changed my last name, as the rest of my family did too, to Lovett. And that was our first. So we bought our first home. My mom was traveling lots, and so I would say I was one of these children who was raised by their environment a
Mm.
lot.
Mm.
My mom was on the road, sometimes a week or two at a time. My stepfather, and I don't know if others listening agree, but step parents are like olives. You either people like love them or they don't like them, but nobody says they're okay, right? I unfortunately didn't have a great relationship with my stepfather. So I was just always longing for this father figure, longing for this strong sense of family. And I think, based on my mom traveling so much, and when she came back, my sister, my mother, or my sister, myself, and my stepfather were all kind of pieing for her attention.
Mm.
That was problematic in our household. So everyone was kind of on their own a little bit. And then, you know, based on my comment on growing up and being raised by my environment, I was one of these kids who just was in every neighborhood, every rough neighborhood. I had friends in every neighborhood. And I did get in a lot of trouble. I got in trouble with the law as a teenager and in my early teens. And I was an angry teen, but always self-aware. Like I actually,
Okay,
yeah,
let's back up.
yeah,
Trouble with the law, you were growing pot in your house. Like, let's be clear,
yes,
right? You vandalized a car when you're 14 years old.
correct.
So
That's right.
we're not just like little minor things. Like, you were on a road, on a path that was not going to end well.
No, absolutely, and I was charged with assault at 21, and so
Mhm.
that was a
Mhm.
cautious or a dangerous one, because luckily I did a program called adult diversion,
Mhm.
where they just say, "Look, you seem like a good person. This would be horrible if you're gonna have a record for the rest of your life." As you know, I entered in the security space, so I was able to kinda, I got
Parlay that.
correct, and I was very lucky, actually.
Mhm.
It could have been a
Mhm.
lot different, and you're right, Whitney. I have friends that, I feel like I won the lottery every day. I
Mhm.
sometimes I feel like I have imposter syndrome because of the life I have, and I feel very lucky. I have friends that aren't around, and certainly have friends that are doing different things
Mhm.
that they probably don't enjoy today.
Mm. Hmm. Okay, so you went into security, and
Yeah,
talk to us about how you had all these experiences and they actually prepared you to be really good as a security guard. What I would love for you to do is tell us about a few of the luminaries that you have security guarded. I'm not sure how you describe
sure.
that.
Yep.
And how you ended up, how your background actually helped you be really good at this. And then what did you build?
Yeah, so my background was good because I I always say I have zero formal education. I
Mhm.
really have, I was horrible at high school. I failed, 2 courses every year, and I always tell this very quick funny story that will kinda display how well I did at school or how well I didn't do. But when I graduated high school, Whitney, I had a 57 in math, and I wanted to upgrade, and so I went to night school to upgrade. And it was a Thursday night course. I always skipped halfway through to go drinking with my friends.
Mhm.
And at the and usually when I was drinking, I had my teacher's phone number. I would call him at 2 a.m. and prank phone call him. He thought it was a little bit funny, but quite annoying as well. And at the end of this, I called him one night. His name was Mr. West. And I said, "Mr. West, how you doing?" He said, "Ron, it's 2:30 a.m." I said, "I know, but I miss you." And I really liked him.
Mhm.
And he said, "Yeah, okay, well, look, I'll tell you what, I'm glad you called, because I have good news and bad news." I said, "Well, what's the good news?" He said, "Good news is you passed." And I was like, "Whoa, Mr. West, this is big news." He said, "Yeah, but there's some bad news." I said, "Well, what could be the bad news? I passed. This is incredible." He said, "Well, I've been teaching night school for 25 years, and you're the first person that's ever paid $140 to downgrade from a 57 to a 50." So he said, "I'll give you your 57. You can go on your way." So
Yeah.
I just didn't do well at school,
Uh,
but I had an ability to, I'll say, read energy. I
mhm,
can really read energy and body language. And so going into security, that was quite helpful, as well
mhm,
as the fact that I could take care of myself. I
mm,
was boxing at a young age, training Brazilian jiu-jitsu at a young age. And so those two skills were quite helpful. They really
mhm,
were.
mm.
And,
And
you
by
know,
the way, I think
yeah,
it's important, it's interesting, and I wanna point this out, is that you also discovered that you were dyslexic, right? At a later so school did not you weren't inclined to do school, but it wasn't something you were probably very good at because you're dyslexic. Is
you
that
know,
right?
and having ADHD, and so
Yeah.
ADHD was kinda like, "Get out of our class, you're
Mhm.
disruptive." And
Yep.
teachers would tell me that, and I
Mhm.
feel now, as I look back, I almost feel bad, and this is interesting. My daughter George is 5, and we're looking at where do we put her in school. My wife comes from private school, and she's big into private school, and I'm saying, "No, we don't need that. That's not where how I grew up."
Mhm.
But so we went to a few of the public and private schools here just to, um, go into them and try to understand what school looks like today. And it's interesting, as we went through one of the private schools, it almost brought tears to my eyes because
Mm.
I just saw these children and the experiences they were getting, and it was emotional for me because my experience was not that. These children were happy. They were enjoying the
Yeah.
the day that they were there. And for me, it was the most unenjoyable thing in life. And
Right.
so
Right.
it looked like school doesn't have to be that. And I asked them, I said, "What are you trying to achieve here? If a student does what you're trying to achieve?" And they said, "Look, two things. We just want people here to be great citizens, and if they can, we'd like and encourage them to make an impact on the planet." And I was like, "Oh my
Mhm.
goodness, like, where did these places come from?" This was a private school.
Mhm.
So we have decided to put her in a private school.
Mhm.
So I think the public school failed me as a child,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Mm. Okay. Yes. All right. So you saw that your daughter's gonna have a very different educational experience, which is lovely.
Yes. Yeah.
So, now you decide you're gonna build this business. Talk
Yeah.
to us, just give us a quick
Yeah.
rundown, some of the people that you've had an opportunity to, work with.
Yeah, so I also discovered in the private security business, at least in Canada, I had no formal training. And
Mhm.
so I was gonna take an executive protection course out of Raleigh, Colorado, or something like that. And it was, you're on a plane, you're shooting guns. You can't shoot guns in Canada. And I had signed up for this course, and then I got a call from a company out of Ontario. Ringo Starr was doing a Canadian tour, and he was gonna be in Ontario with Sheila E. and John Wade, I think, and Paul Carrick. It's just some big names, and it was called the Ringorama Tour. And they said, We'd like you to come in and look after him for 1 month." And I was like, "Wow, like one of the Beatles? Like this is a big deal." And so Ringo Starr was my first executive protection gig for 1 month, and it was very funny because back then I was managing my business from Toronto, and my cell phone bill was more than I was getting paid to be Ringo's personal bodyguard. It was just a total disaster, but a great experience. And I went on to be private security for Jay-Z, Rolling Stones, Donald Trump, Al Gore, Tiger Woods. So it really built a
Mhm.
strong name of being the go-to in Canada for executive protection. It was because I was able to, not because I was incredibly intelligent or had training. It was really because I could read the crowd. I would understand the energy's different here. We shouldn't go here, or we should
Mm.
take a different path. Something's changed, and here's some things I should look out for. And
Mm.
so those skills that I grew up with were very helpful to me.
Mm. So it's your superpower. So now what you did we're going to talk about the sale of your business in a minute, but you were able to really scale your business.
Yeah,
And one of the ways you scaled it, and you've written a book called Outrageous Empowerment, is by really seeing all of the security professionals. And you said there were 3,500, seeing them as stakeholders. And so, what I would love for people who are listening, they would love a few suggestions from you on what are some really tell us a story about how you empowered one of your security professionals, and then
right.
what's the practical takeaway for us around that?
Yeah, so I think the most powerful story, and I talk about it in the book, is the story of Ashwani. And
Mm.
Ashwani was a security guard in Toronto, and I really wanted to empower frontline security guards, and really what we're talking about here is the subtitle of the book, which is the incredible story of giving employees their brains back. It wasn't because they didn't have brains, but the
Mhm.
industry, from my perspective, took it from them. Just said, "Look,
Mm.
here's what you do, and here's why you do it,
Yeah.
and you don't ask any questions." And that's horrible. That's a horrible. It's a horrible thing to happen. And so Ashwani, um, he was working for a company for 15 years. We won the contract. This is a unionized business. We're a small company from Halifax, Nova Scotia, non-unionized. And I get a call from the security manager. He says, "Look, Ashwani's been here. We can't lose him. He knows this site inside and out. Can you call him and have a discussion?" I said, "Absolutely." So I get Ashwani, who's he's an immigrant from India. I get him on the phone, and he's very taken back that he's getting a call from a
Mhm.
CEO. This is different
Mhm.
for him. And I said, "Shwani, nice to meet you." And he says, "First, sir, congratulations on the contract." I said, "Yeah, thank you." And I said, "Shwani, do you have any questions?" He said, "Yeah, look. My first question is, what kind of vehicle are you going to buy?" And I said, "Shwani, that's a great question, but I'm going to turn that question back to you. What vehicle do you think we should buy? Because you've been there for 15 years. I have no business telling you
Mm.
what vehicle we're going to buy." He was he was taken back again,
Mm.
and he stopped, paused, and he said, "Well, sir, we should have four-wheel drive, and it should have these attributes and trunk space because we have to move things around." And so he went through the list, and I said, "Shwani, I'll tell you what. Why don't you find us a vehicle? And if you get us a good deal, I'll pay you a $300 bonus." I thought he hung up on me. The phone went silent. And then boom, he said, "Sir, I will get you the best vehicle that you've ever seen. I will not let you down, sir." He was on a mission. Like no one gets this excited to buy something.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so my controller, the gentleman that was doing the accounting, he overhears this conversation. He comes in the room and he says, "Ron, look, like you're young and you're a young CEO, and I don't think you know how this works.
They're there.
Yeah, that's right. I'm the controller, which means
Mhm.
I control the cash. I buy things. So I overheard you telling this gentleman, Ashwani, who, by the way, isn't an employee of ours. He's going to start in about a month's time.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think this is a very dangerous thing." I said, "Well, if you think that behind your computer, searching on the internet, you're going to find a better vehicle for a better deal than Ashwani, who's going to go to car dealerships and hassle the employees there, the salespeople. He's out for blood. If you think you can beat him at this, then hey, I'll pay you the 300." So off they go, and Ashwani finds, a vehicle that was 3 years or 6 years newer, $3,000 cheaper. It was unbelievable.
Uh-huh.
And then this continues, you know, because the question was, what's the impacts of this, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I had a salesperson that was coming through Toronto maybe 6 months later, and I had a meeting with Ashwani's old boss that day, and we were gonna hire him, and I said, "Tell me about Ashwani." He said, "Well, I don't wanna speak ill, but he was a good security guard, but he didn't look after things." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, the vehicle was always messy that we provided, and we wrote him up multiple times." And so I remember that, and I ran into a colleague of mine who just came from the site later on that day, and he said, "I came from the site." I said, "Did you meet Ashwani?" "Yes, I did." "Did you see the vehicle?" "Yes." I said, "How was it inside? Tell me." He said, "It was so clean, you could eat your breakfast off the
It's
floor."
immaculate.
Right? And so I knew we were onto something. So Ashwani started as a, disgruntled employee. He's now has a sense of pride. And then he moves to what I call a absolutely, he is a passionate stakeholder.
Yeah.
And the final piece of the story, Whitney, which is amazing, is Ashwani calls me 6 months later and says, "Ron, I need to meet with you. It's very important." Now, I start to story tell. We're going to lose a contract. Someone's died.
Yeah.
Something
Yeah.
bad happened.
Yeah.
I go and meet him in Toronto. He says, "Can you meet me at a coffee shop?" And I meet him there. He's got a bit of a bit of a smirk on his face. And I come in the coffee shop, and he sits me down. He opens his laptop, and lo and behold, he has a 17-page PowerPoint presentation on how my company, Source Security, is going to expand his native company of India. He makes $13 an hour. I couldn't have our COO thinking that strategically about the business. And it started, the presentation started with our core values because that was the key thing that we could not,
Wow.
move on. And so he was a
Wow.
passionate stakeholder. And we had so many of these stories.
Wow. Oh, okay. So the high level takeaway, and then we're going to look at a few comments, is you. What for you is that big high level takeaway based on that? It's
Well,
an
the
amazing
high
story.
level takeaway, I think three things
Mhm.
that I think are important that I think at a high level that those who are listening out there can do.
Yeah.
Um, Even though they are high level. One is once you have your values established, right, and you're screening and onboarding for your values, to keep them alive and sustain them, the two easy things to do are coach on your values. Hey, yesterday, what you did, this behavior wasn't aligned with our values. So it's not me against you anymore. We're talking about the
Mm,
foundational values of
mm,
the company and celebrate when people have done a great job and aligned with your values. It's just coach to
yeah,
adjust and celebrate.
yeah.
The
Mm,
the the other 2 things that I think are important is this decision-making process, which I think you and I talked about on my podcast on scaling culture, which is was also the tool that gave people their brains back. So instead of having a policy-driven company and having a bunch of rules, which we all know rules are made for children. If you want your employees to act like children, then continue to give them rules. We turn this into a decision-making process. And I want to be clear, this comes in handy when an employee at any level was faced with any decision that they have not been trained to do or dealt with, or they wanted something new.
mhm,
And so what that was if you're faced with something new, or you want to be innovative or trial something new or pilot something, ask yourself three simple questions. Question number one, is what you're about to do, is it the right thing for our customer? Yes or no? Does it add value to the customer? Question number two, does it add value and is it the right thing for our business and our purpose, changing the security industry and our values? And number three, are you willing to be accountable? If the
mm,
answer is yes, 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 don't ask anybody, just do it. And so
mm,
that
mm,
is the underbelly of what
so
a
good.
Shawani did, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I love it. I hope someone will write that in. We've got some amazing comments. Oh, this is so fun. So, a number of people, Ron, are commenting on your voice. They really like your voice. Have people told you that they like your voice before?
Well, I'm disappointed because I feel I'm a little raspy. I'm drinking water. I'm a little raspy today. So my radio voice is not as good as it should be. I'm going to give myself 7.5 out of 10.
Yeah, okay, there you go. So some, Anoop saying, I think you had the sixth sense, intuition power. Sir Ron, they're calling you Sir Ron. I love that. Let's see. Mariah saying, this is brilliant. And then Tom saying, yes, coach and celebrate. Ron is rocking this unlimited sleep. I love
Thank
that.
you. Thank you,
Okay.
Tommy. I think you're a father too. Thank you. And well, look, the last piece I want to say,
Yeah.
and this is also where I think there's huge potential in all of our company's culture because we hire people for a job, but people have other skills. This is, the one thing
Mhm.
we did is tap into untapped potential.
Mm,
Ashwani was a security guard that wrote security reports, but he had this negotiation grit that he wasn't able to use in his day-to-day job.
yeah.
So what that tells me is we should be building relationships to really get to understand people and what drives them, what are their passions and the other skills that we didn't maybe hire them for, but we can utilize. They have had these. Sometimes we didn't hire someone for their
Yeah.
actual superpower, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So, and I'm feeling a little bit that way as we're talking. So we'll get to that in a minute. Now, in our work, most of you know, pretty much all of you, that we talk about the S curve of learning, and you get to the top of an S curve, and you've mastered something, and it's time for you to do something new. And oftentimes we think about let's start something new. But sometimes when you get to the top of an S curve, it's an S curve that you don't actually want to be on, and it's about stopping something. And
Mhm.
so, Ron, I would love, do you have a story where you stopped doing something, where you disrupted yourself, you stepped back in order to slingshot forward?
Look,
Anything come to mind?
absolutely, and this is recent. I haven't spoke about this kind of publicly. I've certainly told good friends about it, but I'm happy to share. So my superpower was always, like we talked about, this physical ability.
Mm,
And what I mean by that is I was always, you know, from being bullied as a child to looking after my friends, I was a bodyguard. I mean, I could that was a superpower. And I was always the person, Whitney, that, if you're you see someone being pushed around and someone's going to do something, you say, don't do anything. Someone else will deal with that. That was
mm,
always me. I dealt with it every time. I was
mm,
the 10th person that was going to come in and whoop ass. And so anyway, and this followed me from my childhood to my security to even cleaning up communities. At the beginning of Vita, we were in some very challenging neighborhoods where I would go in and deal with things myself to try to make these a safer place. And so last summer, I had this situation, and I'm going to make this brief, where I had some rocks stolen from my property. It
Mm.
was from our summer home. So some rocks were taken, and it happened to be the contractor of our neighbors are from New York. And so what had happened is we had these rocks, and the landscapers put them out in the front of our driveway. And there was a few people that called and said, "Hey, I'd like to buy these." And so I sold them to two individuals. There was two types of rocks. But the next day, the contractor from across the street, he came over and gave one of the employees $100. Said, "I know the owner. I'm buying these rocks." So the employee came in. He was a young landscaper and said, "Oh, the guy knows you. Here's $100." And I'm so confused. And so I don't know what's going on because I already sold these to two other people. So I go across the street, and the guy's there, and I said, "Hey, do you know me?" And he says, "No, I don't." And I said, "Right, I didn't think so. So those rocks are mine. Put them back. They're already sold." And he says, "No, I don't think so." And Whitney, I think that Ashley Kushner's gonna come out of the bushes with cameras. Like, I'm being
Uh-huh.
punked. I played
Uh-huh.
a lot of pranks. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
finally, someone got me really good.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Ha, ha, ha, put them back." And he says, "No, no, you'd have to pay me for my time. I'm not doing that." And I'm still very confused. So I'm like, I'm getting hot, right?
Mhm.
And I'm like,
Mhm.
"I'm gonna walk away." I said, "Look, pal," he's probably in his mid-50s. I said, "Put them back. I want them there in the morning. People are picking them up." In the morning, I go, he's still not put them back. So I beeline it over to him. I'm furious because I had called people that day and they had said, "This guy's a real bully.
Mhm.
He's taken from other property, he takes advantage of people." So now I'm putting my superpower cape on. I'm going to sort this guy out, you know?
Mhm.
So I go over there and he won't talk to me, and he's moving some wood around. So I put my foot on a piece of wood, and he moves it, and a piece kind of goes flying up. And I'm like, "Well, that's my green light." He moved first. So I grab a hold of him and I say, "Hey, I'm not a rich kid from Chester, which is like a mini Nantucket
Yeah.
visually." I said, "So you put the rocks back, or there's going to be a big problem." And I've got a hold of him, and luckily my neighbor comes up. He's like, "Ron, geez, well, calm down." And I'm like, "This is so bad." So I let him go, and then so the next morning I wake up, and our daughter, we have two bunks off our kitchen, and our back door has it's a very complex locking system on it. And I go downstairs, and George is not in her bed, my daughter. And I look at the back door and it's open. And Whitney, my heart drops. And I'm like, "Oh my God, the guy, his family, they took my daughter over what I did. I can't believe I grabbed him over rocks and my daughter's gone." And so I don't know if you ever saw the movie Man on Fire, but
Uh-uh.
like I'm gonna go full Man on Fire. Like for those who know the movie, I'm gonna go full Man on Fire. And I'm freaking out. So we have a small guest house. I go over there. Luckily, she's in there with the babysitter. So, but I was in such a dark place that I
Mm.
was like, "Oh my God." And so what hit me, back to what we're talking about, and I talk to entrepreneurs about this all the time, and leaders, the skills that you have today are the same skills that will get in your way as you try to grow. But I hadn't thought about it this level. And so what we're talking about is I needed to deal with this because I had gotten physical my whole life for what I believed were the right reasons. But
Mhm.
this same superpower that got me to where I am is
Mhm.
the same one that's going to take me out. And I talked to a good friend of mine, and he said, "Ron, I know you like to keep things simple, like a decision-making process.
Yeah.
So before you had to cross the street to, and interacted with that gentleman, if you would have asked yourself the question, is this worth going to prison for a year and not seeing your children?" Now, if I ask that question, Whitney, this is
Yeah.
laughable. It's
Yeah.
laughable. I
Yeah.
would never do it. And so I went to a very deep, I'll call it dark,
Mhm.
self-reflective place for a week. And it was hard because I wasn't gaining a new skill. I was having to let go of this
Mhm.
thing that I mean, it got me excited. It gave me energy. It gave me stories. I mean, I've defended my wife and I in Nicaragua, who were robbed by four masked people with machetes, and I had a superpower. I didn't get
Mhm.
stabbed. Everybody's safe, and I have
Mhm.
to I have to let this thing go now. And so I had a hard time with that. But
Interesting.
yeah, and
Interesting.
so
Interesting.
it was about I think it is disruptive because it was such a strong part of me,
Mhm.
and that I loved too, and I really
Right.
loved, you know?
Right. So it's not necessarily letting it go, it's just expanding your repertoire.
It's funny, I feel like it's letting it go for the majority of the situations that I used
Mhm.
to use it,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Mm.
And
Mm.
so
Mm.
I don't know if we're saying the same thing,
I
but
think we are. I think
yeah, like, I'm not
yeah.
saying if someone comes in the house today and attacks the family, I'm gonna tap into the superpower, but there were a lot of times that I would use it,
Yeah.
and I need to not use it now. And
Mm,
so so funny, I was, as the story goes, I'm reflecting and dealing with it, but I don't know if it's gonna work until the next time occurs. And
yeah.
so a month later, I'm at a coffee shop. I've got both children, Wellington, my son, and Georgia. They're both peeing in different bathrooms. And my father-in-law comes in. He's like, "Oh, I think you parked your truck in front of someone. There's a man who's irate." So I leave and I'm like, "What's going on?" So I go outside the coffee shop and this guy is freaking. He's like, "You idiot! You parked your car. How stupid are you?" And now usually I'm like, how do I?
Yeah.
Right. And Whitney, I'm very proud of this. I was steady hand. My heart didn't beat. I smiled. And I was like, you know what? I'm an idiot. Sorry, I'll move the truck. And I
Mhm.
was like, wow, I got this. Like,
Progress. You
right.
disrupted yourself.
I
I love
disrupted
it.
myself. Yeah.
I love it. Okay, friends, we're going to take a few more comments. As you can tell, we have gone over time, and I know some of you are probably going to need to drop off, but I'm going to ask Ron one more question because I think it's a really important question, and you can come back and listen to this later because it's about the negotiation, high stakes, 24 times EBITDA multiple. Okay, let's just take a few comments. Annette says, what drives people tapping into that unleashed the energy and potential? Ron, thank you for these great growth stories. Lori saying, yes, that's the concept behind how women rise. What got you here won't get you there. Our lovely friend, Marshall Goldsmith. Tom saying growth requires self-reflection. And yes, you just quoted Marshall. And then Lori saying it's all about development. So
Yeah.
Ron, what I would love for us to do as we start to wrap up is I need to close my blinds. It's getting very bright in here, which I will do in just a minute. But share with us, you decided you wanted to sell your business and you said that you sold it at a 24 times EBITDA multiple. Can you basically, you got to the top of a curve, it's time to do something new.
Yeah.
But as I read your book, you you also have a superpower, which is interesting, of both selling and negotiating. Like
Mhm.
that is a towering strength of yours, which I think is very interesting. Is you're saying, I'm not just going to muscle my way through things. I can sell and I can negotiate. And so,
Right.
can you just very briefly tell us what you did when you sold it, and then one or two tips for us on how to be better at negotiating a sale or negotiating in a high stakes situation?
Yeah. And look, wait, I'm very lucky. I talk about a friend and mentor of mine, John Risley, who I think is one of the top negotiators and business people on the globe, on the planet. And so this was with Allied Universal. They have 15 vice presidents of mergers and acquisitions. So I was intimidated,
Mhm.
but I also thought, I led sales in the company and I thought, this is the biggest sale. I need to lead it.
Mm,
Because some will go to the broker. They don't like,
mm,
I wanted to be the one that would pound the table and really play this very strong chess game. And I also felt as an entrepreneur, this will allow me to go full cycle from starting a company, laying the first brick to exiting and
mhm,
leading the charge in that because I need to know about this. I'm going to be doing more of this. I knew that I would have more transactions in the future.
mhm,
And so I think a few key things that were helpful. I was leading the charge, so I was confident and it was up and down. I mean, this was a very stressful time.
mhm,
So a few things that I think were helpful. One, um, when the letter of intent came in, I called John and I said, John, what do I do? And he said, let me tell you something. In the game of negotiation, leverage is key. You need to continue to have leverage as long as you can. The minute you lose leverage,
mm,
you lose some power to negotiate. You need to keep
mm,
as many at the table as long as you can. So I love this, and I believe it's in the book. And I said, well, what do I do, John? He said, well, the letter of intent that you've got from one party, what you're going to do is you're going to tell them because it asks for exclusivity. You only deal with us now when you sign. So John says you need what's called a throwaway card. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you're going to ask for a $200,000 non-refundable deposit. They won't give that to you. You're not going to get it. It's not
mm,
done in your industry, but you don't want it anyways. What you do want is you're going to tell them, fine,
mm,
won't take the deposit, but you have to take out exclusivity. And
mm,
John's play worked beautifully. I was
mm,
able to continue to negotiate with others. They removed that clause. I was able to continue to negotiate, which was so powerful.
mm.
That allowed me to keep others at the table. And I did a deal with another company, not with the first letter of intent. So that was one of the key things.
All
The
right, so
second,
let me recap really quickly.
yeah,
So
please.
basically, the advice was you need to be able to keep the leverage. And so In order to maintain the leverage, you can't have an exclusivity clause, and so you also have to have give something up. And so you said, "Hey, I'd like this $200,000 deposit." That put them into a they said no to you, so that you can go back and, "Well, then I want this." And so now if they wanted to work with you, they needed to say yes, in order to allow both parties to continue to be at the table.
That's right, and so I use this term, the throwaway card, because
Yeah.
it's something that was important to them. I knew I wasn't going to get anyway, so it was a win when I've asked for it, and I knew it's a throwaway card. They're not gonna
Mhm.
give it to me,
Mhm. Mhm.
and so for them, it was a big win to say, "No, you're not having that." I said,
Yeah.
"Great, then I need this little thing. That's this little thing that is incredibly important to me,"
Okay.
right?
Oh, yeah, love it.
So
Okay.
in every deal, the question is, what is the throwaway card?
Yeah.
How do you create one in some cases?
Yeah. I think have you done this yet? Have you written a book on sales and negotiation?
I haven't, my second book, Scaling Culture, was more of the playbook behind
Yeah.
versus release
Yeah,
to market.
yeah. I
I
think it's
love and I do some talking on negotiation, and I have
mhm,
taken Harvard's
mhm,
5-day
mhm.
negotiating course, and I encourage anyone who hasn't taken it to take that, and I've read, Chris Voss's book, Never Split the
Yeah.
Difference.
Yeah.
Those 2
Oh,
things.
great book. Great book.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so it's time for us to wrap up. My question that I will ask you is, Ron, what was useful for you in this conversation?
I mean, one of the things obviously is this superpower thing. This isn't a light switch for me. And
Mhm,
so it's very and thanks for allowing me to bring it up. It's very therapeutic for me. It reminds me how important it was to make that change and to let this thing go. And every time I talk about it, it's quite helpful actually. And
mhm,
so
mhm.
I was hoping we could talk about it because I'm someone when I put something out to the world, it means a lot to me
Yeah.
and that almost like solidifies it. And so it's an important step. And then just I mean, every time I get into these conversations too, Whitney, I just always it makes me very reflective and
Mhm,
allows me to, I just continue to think how blessed and
mhm.
lucky I am to be where I am. And it's just a great reminder of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I love your comment of, like, how to make sure your superpower doesn't become your kryptonite, right?
Right.
So, very valuable. All right, so Ron Lovett, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you to all of you for participating, Lori and Anoop and Raimond and Jorge and Tom and, Bernard and Annette and Mariah. Thank you so much. And remember, everyone, we're all on an S curve of learning, and if you want to, disrupt your company, if you want to grow your company, you have to start by growing your people and by growing yourself. Thank you so much for being with us, and we will see you next Thursday at 9 a.m. Eastern in the United States. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.